Kendrick Lamar Duckworth was born on June 17, 1987, in Compton, California, a city just south of Los Angeles that carried a heavy reputation for gang violence, poverty, and a thriving hip-hop scene that would shape the world. Compton wasn't just a backdrop for Kendrick. It was a heartbeat of his story, a place where dreams and danger lived side by side. His parents, Kenneth Duckworth and Paula Oliver, weren't natives of California. They came from Chicago, a city with its own struggles in the mid-1980s, chasing a fresh start on the West Coast. They settled in Compton before Kendrick was born, hoping to build a better life for their family. But Compton's reality was tough. The city was known for its gang culture, with the Bloods and Crips dominating neighborhoods, and the crack epidemic of the 1980s hit hard, leaving broken families and boarded-up houses in its wake. Kendrick's parents named him after Eddie Kendricks, the smooth voice singer from The Temptations, a nod to their love for music that would later echo in their son's life. Kendrick was the oldest of 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, growing up in a cramped apartment on Compton's west side, where money was tight and survival meant staying sharp. His dad, known as Kenny, worked odd jobs, sometimes hustling to make ends meet, while his mom, Paula, was the backbone, keeping the kids in line and making sure they had food on the table, even if it was just beans and rice some nights. Their home was filled with love, but also the tension of living in a place where gunshots were as common as car horns. Kendrick saw things no kid should. Friends losing family to drive-bys, police raids on neighbors, and a constant pull of the streets tempting young boys with promises of respect and money. Despite this, his parents were strict, teaching to stay out of trouble and keep his head down. They weren't perfect. Kendrick later rapped about his dad's past run-ins with trouble in Chicago, but they wanted better for their kids. Compton's chaos shaped Kendrick's worldview early on. He was quiet, almost shy, but his eyes were always open, soaking in the world around him. He'd sit on the stoop, watching older kids cruise by in lowriders, blasting Ice Cube or Snoop Dogg, while gang members posted up on corners, their colors bright against the faded buildings. Music was everywhere in Compton. Block parties with DJs spinning funk and rap, church choirs on Sundays, and car stereos pumping bass through the streets. Kendrick loved it all, but he also loved basketball, dreaming of being the next Magic Johnson, spending hours on cracked asphalt courts, dribbling past bigger kids. He was good, but not great, and deep down, something else was calling him. At 8 years old, he had a moment that changed everything. He saw Dr. Dre and Tupac Shakur filming the California Love music video in Compton, their energy and swagger lighting up the block. The sight of 2 rap giants, especially Dre, a Compton legend, made Kendrick's heart race. He knew then he wanted to make music, to tell stories like they did. He started writing rhymes in spiral notebooks, filling page after page with words about his life, his fears, and his dreams. His poems weren't just kid stuff. They were raw, capturing the sound of sirens, the smell of barbecue at family gatherings, and the weight of a city that could crush you or lift you up. Compton streets were a paradox, dangerous but alive, full of pain but also pride. Kendrick wasn't blind to the darkness. He saw friends get pulled into gangs, some as young as 12, trading school for street corners. He lost people, cousins, neighbors, to violence or prison, and those losses stuck with him, later showing up in his music. But he also saw joy, summer cookouts, kids racing bikes, and old folks sharing stories on porches. His parents kept him close, making sure he went to school and stayed away from the gangs that lurked nearby. Kendrick attended Centennial High School, a place where fights broke out in the halls and police patrolled the grounds. But he stood out as a good student, pulling A's and BS in classes like English and history. His teachers saw something special. He had a way with words, turning essays into stories that felt alive. He wrote poetry for class assignments, impressing his teachers with lines that carried the rhythm of the streets. Outside school, he was navigating a world where being soft could get you tested. But Kendrick wasn't about that life. He wasn't a gang, didn't carry a gun, but he knew the rules. Keep your head up, don't snitch, and stay loyal to your people. His nickname, K. came from childhood friends, a playful tag that stuck as he started rapping. By his early teens, he was serious about music, sneaking into a local studio called The Garage, a spot where Compton's aspiring rappers and producers hung out. The Garage was a cramped, sweaty room filled with old equipment. But to Kendrick, it was a sanctuary. He'd spend hours there, laying down verses over beats made by local producers, his voice still high-pitched but full of fire. His rhymes were different, not just boasts or gang tales, but stories about his block, his family, and the kids he saw struggling. He was 16 when he dropped his first mixtape in 2003, called Youngest Head Nigga in Charge, Hub City Threat, Mine of the Year. It was rough, recorded on cheap mics, but it had soul. The mixtape spread through Compton like wildfire, passed around on burned CDs at school and barbershops. Local DJs played it, and kids started chanting his name at parties. The title was bold, but Kendrick backed it up with bars that felt like Compton itself, gritty, real, and unapologetic. The mixtape caught the attention of Anthony Tiffith, a Compton native who ran a small label called Top Dog Entertainment, or TD. Tiffith, known as Top, saw Kendrick as a diamond in the rough, a kid with raw talent and a story to tell. Signing with TD was a turning point, but it wasn't glamorous. Kendrick was still broke, still living in his parents' apartment, still dodging the dangers of his city. He performed at tiny venues, like community centers and hole-in-the-wall clubs, battling other rappers to prove he belonged. His early shows were raw. He'd rap until his voice gave out, feeding off the crowd's energy. He looked up to West Coast legends like Dr. Dre, DJ Quick, and Corrupt, studying their flows and their ability to make Compton's pain sound universal. But Kendrick wasn't just mimicking them. He was carving his own lane. His rhymes mixed the bravado of a teenager with the wisdom of someone who'd seen too much. He rapped about dodging bullets, but also about wanting more than the streets, more than the cycle that trapped so many of his friends. Compton gave him his voice, but it also gave him scars. He saw friends die, some to guns, others to drugs, and those losses weighed heavy. He later said he felt survivor's guilt, wondering why he made it out when others didn't. His music became a way to process that pain, to give voice to the kids who didn't have one. He wasn't preaching, not yet. He was just telling the truth as he saw it. TD gave him a platform, but the road was long. Kendrick spent his late teens grinding, recording in makeshift studios, performing for crowds of 20 people, and battling the doubt that crept in when the money didn't come. He was a skinny kid with a high voice, not the typical image of a rapper, but his words carried weight. He'd rap about the corner store where he bought candy, the church where his grandma prayed, the police helicopters that buzzed overhead at night. Every line was Compton, every bar a piece of his soul. By the time he was 20, he was still K-Dot, still local, but the buzz was growing. Mixtapes like Training Day in 2005 and No Sleep, till NYC in 2007 showed he was getting sharper, his flows tighter, his stories deeper. He was rapping about Compton's struggles, but also its resilience, the way people found joy in the middle of chaos. He'd seen too much to stay quiet. Crackheads begging outside liquor stores, mothers cry at funerals, kids his age locked up or gunned down. But he also saw hope. The laughter kids playing in the street, the pride in his parents' eyes when he brought home good grades, the music that brought his city together. Kendrick's early life wasn't just about surviving Compton. It was about learning to tell its story. He was a kid with a pen, a mic, and a dream, carrying the weight of a city that would one day call him its king. Kendrick Lamar's rise to fame started in the late 2000s, when he was still a skinny kid from Compton rapping under the name K-Dot. Trying to make a name in a city where talent was plentiful, but breaking out was rare. He was in his early 20s, signed to Top Dog Entertainment, a small independent label run by Anthony Top Tiffith, a Compton native who saw something special in Kendrick's raw, storytelling rhymes. TD was more than a label. It was a family, a crew of underdogs from the same streets, including rappers like J-Rock, Absol, and Schoolboy Q, all hustling to put Compton back on the map after the West Coast dominance in the 90s had faded. Kendrick was hungry, spending long nights in makeshift studios, recording over beats that captured the gritty soul of the city. Boom-bap drums, G-funk bass lines, and samples that echoed the sound of Dr. Dre and DJ Quick. He was still living with his parents, scraping by with no real money, but his drive was unstoppable. He performed at tiny venues, community centers, dive bars, and local talent shows, where the crowds were small but loud, chanting his name when he spit bars about Compton's pain and pride. His early mixtapes, like Training Day in 2005 and C4 in 2009, showed he could hang with the best, blending West Coast swagger with introspective lyrics that set him apart. C4 was a tribute to Lil Wayne's A Carter series, with Kendrick remixing Wayne's beats but adding his own stories of Compton life, crack deals on his block, friends' loss of violence, and his own dreams of escaping the cycle. The mixtape spread online, shared on blogs and forums like DatPiff, where fans started noticing this kid who rapped like he was carrying his whole city on his back. By 2009, Kendrick decided to drop the K-Dot name, a nickname for his childhood that felt too tied to his street days. He wanted to be real, to let the world know him as Kendrick Lamar, a name that carried his family's history and his own truth. This shift wasn't just about branding. It was about owning his story, making his music feel like a diary instead of persona. In 2010, he released Overly Dedicated, a mixtape that marked a turning point. It was his first project as Kendrick Lamar, and it showed he was more than a local act. Tracks like PNP and Average Joe mixed sharp wordplay with vivid stories of Compton struggles. Kids growing up too fast, families barely getting by, and the temptation the streets always lurking. The mixtape had a raw, soulful sound, with jazzy beats and introspective rhymes that felt like conversations with a friend. It wasn't polished, but it was honest, and that's what made it hit. Overly Dedicated sold a few thousand copies independently, but its real power was online, where hip-hop heads on blogs and early social media platforms like Twitter started calling Kendrick the next big thing. The buzz caught the ear of Dr. Dre, the Compton legend who'd inspired Kendrick as a kid when he saw him filming California Love with Tupac. Dre heard Overly Dedicated and reached out, seeing in Kendrick the same hunger he'd had decades earlier. That connection was huge. Dre was a kingmaker, the man behind NWA, Snoop Dogg, and Eminem. His cosign gave Kendrick credibility, but also raised the stakes. In 2011, Kendrick dropped Section .80, his first major project with TD, and it was a game changer. The album was a concept piece, named after the Section 8 housing projects where Kendrick and many of his friends grew up, and it spoke to the generation born in the 1980s, raised in the shadow of crack, gang wars, and Reagan-era policies that left cities like Compton reeling. Songs like Hyper We Are, produced by J. Cole, were anthems of resistance, calling for self-awareness and black pride, while Rigor Mortis showed Kendrick's technical skill, with dizzying flows that left other rappers scrambling to keep up. Tracks like ADHD tackled the struggles of his peers, numbed by drugs, chasing quick highs, and lost in a system that didn't care. Section .80 wasn't just music. It was a statement, blending political commentary with personal stories in a way that felt fresh and urgent. It sold about 5,000 copies in its first week. Modest numbers for a major label, but huge for an indie project. More importantly, it spread like wildfire online, with fans dissecting its lyrics and critics praising its depth. Kendrick started getting invites to bigger stages, opening for artists like Drake and A$AP Rocky on their tours. His live shows were electric. He'd pace the stage, sweat pouring down, rapping every word like it was his last chance. He wasn't flashy, no chains or fancy outfits, just a t-shirt and jeans, letting his words do the talking. Fans loved his energy, the way he connected with them, like he was still one of them, not some untouchable star. The buzz around Section .80 led to a major deal in 2012 with Aftermath Entertainment, Dr. Dre's label, and Interscope Records, home to giants like Eminem and 50 Cent. This was Kendrick's shot, but it came with pressure. He was now playing on a national stage, with expectations sky high. That same year, he released his debut album, Good Kid, Mad City, a record that would change everything. Subtitled A Short Film by Kendrick Lamar. It was a cinematic journey through his Compton youth, told through skits, songs, and vivid storytelling. The album followed a day in the life of a teenage Kendrick, navigating gang pressures, first loves, and the search for meaning. Tracks like Swimming Pools Drank became radio hits with its catchy hook and dark message about alcoholism hitting hard. Bitch, Don't Kill My Vibe was introspective, a plea for peace amid chaos, while Money Trees painted a picture of Compton's hustle, with its dreamy beat and tales of chasing dreams over dice games. The deeper cuts, like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, were gut-wrenching, telling the stories of friends' loss of violence and the guilt Kendrick carried from making it out. The album's production, with contributions from Dr. Dre, Hit Boy, and TD's in-house team, was lush and cinematic, blending West Coast funk with modern trap and soul. Critics called it a classic, comparing it to Nas's Illmatic for its storytelling and Outkast's Aquemini for its ambition. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, selling 242,000 copies in its first week, and eventually went platinum, selling over 1 million copies. Kendrick was no longer just a Compton rapper. He was a voice for a generation, a kid from the hood speaking truths that resonated far beyond his city. He toured the world, performing in Europe, Asia, and Australia, sharing stages with legends like Kanye West and Eminem. His shows grew from small clubs to arenas, but he never lost his edge, delivering every verse with the same hunger he had at the garage in Compton. Fame brought new challenges, paparazzi, interviews, and the weight of being a role model. Kendrick stayed private, avoiding the spotlight offstage, but his music was louder than ever. He was still tied to Compton, shouting out his city in every interview, but now he was carrying its stories to the world. Good Kid, Mad City wasn't just an album. It was a declaration that Kendrick Lamar was here to stay, a storyteller who could make you feel the heat of Compton streets and the hope in it hard. The road to fame wasn't easy. There were doubters who said he was too conscious, too weird, not commercial enough. He faced pressure from labels to make hits, but Kendrick stayed true, refusing to dumb down his lyrics. He also dealt with the grind of touring, the loneliness of being away from home, and the fear of losing himself to the industry. TDE kept him grounded, with Top and his label mates acting like brothers, pushing him to keep going. Dr. Dre's mentorship was crucial, teaching him how to navigate the business without selling out. By 2013, Kendrick was a star, but he was still the same kid who'd filled notebooks with rhymes, still wrestling with the same questions about life, faith, and purpose. His rise wasn't just about music. It was about proving that a kid from Compton could change a game without losing his soul. Kendrick Lamar's rise to fame with Good Kid, Mad City in 2012 made him a star, but he wasn't content to rest on that success. He wanted to push a hop forward, to make music that didn't just entertain, but challenge the world to think. By 2013, he was already seen as one of rap's brightest talents, but he felt the weight of expectations from fans, critics, and his own ambition to say something bigger. He was no longer just telling Compton's story. He was speaking for a generation, for Black America, for anyone grappling with identity and struggle in a divided country. His next move would redefine what rap could be. In 2015, he released To Pimp a Butterfly, an album that wasn't just a follow-up, but a seismic shift in music and culture. It was bold, experimental, and unapologetically black, blending jazz, funk, soul, and hip-hop into a sound that felt like a live jam session in a Compton barbershop. The album tackled heavy themes: systemic racism, self-love, survivors' guilt, and the complexities of fame, through tracks that were as much poetry as they were songs. Kendrick worked with producers like Thundercat, Robert Glasper, and Flying Lotus, pulling from influences like Miles Davis and Parliament Funkadelic to create a sound that was raw, chaotic, and beautiful. Songs like Alright became anthems, its hopeful chorus, We Gon' Be Alright, ringing out at Black Lives Matter protests across the country after police killings of unarmed black men like Michael Brown and Freddie Gray sparked outrage. The song wasn't just a hit. It was a rallying cry, played at marches, on car radios, and in living rooms, giving voice to a movement. Tracks like King Kunta mixed funky grooves with sharp lyrics about reclaiming power, while The Blacker the Berry confronted racism head-on, with Kendrick spitting raw anger about inequality while wrestling with his own contradictions. The album's closer, Mortal Man, featured a fictional conversation with Tupac Shakur, using old interview clips to explore leadership and legacy. To Pimp a Butterfly was dense, demanding listeners to sit with its ideas, and it wasn't built for radio. It was built to provoke. Critics called it a masterpiece, comparing it to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On for its social commentary and ambition. It debuted at number 1, selling 324,000 copies in its first week and went platinum, but its real impact was cultural. It won 5 Grammys in 2016, including Best Rap Album and Kendrick's performance at the ceremony. with a stage setup of chains and African imagery, was a bold statement about black pride and pain. President Barack Obama invited him to the White House, calling How Much a Dollar Costs his favorite song, a track about compassion and guilt that hit like a sermon. Kendrick was now a cultural force, not just a rapper, but the album also sparked debate. Some fans wanted more bangers like Good Kid, Mad City, while others embraced his complexity. Kendrick didn't care about pleasing everyone. He was chasing truth. He kept evolving, and in 2017 he dropped Damn, a tighter, more accessible album that still carried his signature depth. It was personal, exploring themes of faith, fear, and duality, with Kendrick questioning his role as a savior and a sinner. Tracks like Humble were massive hits, its booming beat and catchy line, Sit Down, Be Humble, dominating radio and social media. The song's video, with Kendrick in a Pope's robe and recreating the Last Supper, was a visual flex, showing he could balance art and mainstream appeal. Other tracks like DNA celebrated black identity while confronting stereotypes and fear, dug into his anxieties, from childhood terrors to the pressures of fame. Damn was a commercial juggernaut, debuting at number 1 with 603,000 units sold in its first week and going triple platinum. It won 5 Grammys, including Best Rap Album, and made history when Kendrick became the first rapper to win a Pulitzer Prize for music in 2018, with the committee calling it a virtuosic song collection that captured the modern black experience. Kendrick was now operating on a level few artists ever reach, blending street cred with high art. He toured the world, headlining festivals like Coachella, where his sets were like theater with elaborate visuals and storytelling that left crowds speechless. He collaborated with pop stars like Rihanna on Loyalty and rock legends like U2 on XXX, proving he could cross genres without losing his edge. In 2018, he took on a new challenge, curating and producing the soundtrack for Black Panther, Marvel's groundbreaking superhero film celebrating African culture. Kendrick saw the movie as a chance to amplify black pride on a global stage. He brought in TD artists like SZA and J-Rock, along with stars like The Weeknd and Travis Scott, to create an album that was both a companion to the film and a standalone masterpiece. Tracks like All the Stars with SZA became global hits, earning an Oscar nomination, while King's Dead with J-Rock and Future was a gritty banger that showed Kendrick's versatility. The soundtrack went platinum and won a Grammy, cementing Kendrick's influence beyond hip-hop. He wasn't just making music. He was shaping culture from fashion, where his Reebok collab promoted Compton unity, to politics, where his lyrics were quoted in debates about race and justice. His impact reached classrooms, with teachers using his songs to discuss poetry and history, and his name became synonymous with authenticity in a genre often criticized for chasing trends. But being a cultural figurehead wasn't easy. Kendrick faced criticism. Some said To Pimp a Butterfly was too preachy. Others felt Damn leaned too commercial. He was caught in a balancing act, trying to stay true to Compton while speaking to the world. He also grappled with the pressure of being a spokesperson for Black America, a role he never asked for but couldn't escape. His lyrics showed the toll. Songs like You from To Pimp a Butterfly laid bare his depression, his fear of letting his people down. He stayed private, avoiding tabloids and keeping his personal life quiet. But his music was where he bared his soul. Compton remained his anchor. He'd go back to visit family, perform at local events, and talk to kids about staying out of trouble. He never forgot the streets that raised him, even as he played sold-out shows in London and Tokyo. His influence was undeniable. Rappers like Jay, Cole, and Chance the Rapper cited him as an inspiration, and his album set a new standard for what hip-hop could say and do. He wasn't chasing hits. He was chasing legacy, using his platform to talk about police brutality, mental health, and the beauty of black culture. Kendrick's evolution wasn't just artistic. It was personal. He was still the shy kid from Centennial High, but now he was a leader, a voice for those who felt voiceless. His music challenged listeners to confront hard truths about race, about power, about themselves, while offering hope that change was possible. By the end of this period, Kendrick Lamar wasn't just a rapper. He was a poet, a prophet, a mirror for a nation wrestling with its soul. Kendrick Lamar's life off the stage was as complex as the stories he told in his music, a mix of loyalty to his roots, a quiet personal life, and the heavy burden of being a voice for millions while wrestling with his own doubts and demons. Growing up in Compton, Kendrick was shaped by a tight-knit family, and that foundation stayed with him even as fame pulled him into a world of bright lights and relentless pressure. He was never one for the spotlight outside his music, keeping his personal life guarded in a way that set him apart from rappers who live for tabloids and social media. His relationship with Whitney Alford, his high school sweetheart from Centennial High, was a cornerstone of his life, a rare constant in a career full of chaos. They met as teenagers in Compton, bonding over shared dreams and a shared struggle, and their connection grew through the years, rooted in trust and mutual respect. Whitney wasn't just a partner. She was a confidant, someone who knew the real Kendrick, not the superstar. They got engaged in 2015, a quiet moment that Kendrick confirmed in interviews without fanfare, and together they welcomed 2 children, a daughter, Uzi, born in July 2019, and a son, Enoch, born in March 2021. Kendrick kept his kids out of the public eye, rarely mentioning them except his music, where he'd weave their names into lyrics about fatherhood and legacy. He didn't post family photos on Instagram or flaunt his life for clout, choosing instead to shield Whitney and their children from the media's glare. His home life was a sanctuary, a place to escape the demands of being Kendrick Lamar. But even that wasn't always enough to quiet the storms in his mind. Fame brought challenges that tested his spirit, and Kendrick was open about his battles with depression, especially after Good Kid. Mad City catapulted him to stardom in 2012. The pressure to follow up a classic album, to speak for Compton, to represent Black America, weighed heavy on a man who was still, at his core, the shy kid who filled notebooks with poetry. He'd seen friends die, seen his city struggle, and now he felt the eyes of the world on him, expected him to have all the answers. Songs like You from The Pimp a Butterfly laid bare his darkest moments, with Kendrick rapping through tears about self-doubt, guilt, and the fear of failing his people. He'd sit in hotel rooms on tour, thousands of miles from Compton, questioning his purpose, wondering if his music was making a difference or just adding to the noise. His faith was another battleground. Raised Christian by his mother and grandmother, Kendrick grew up in church, singing in the choir and hearing sermons about salvation, but as an adult, he wrestled with God in his lyrics. Tracks like Faith from his early work in YH, from Damn, showed a man searching for meaning, asking why a loving God let his city suffer, why he'd been spared when so many friends weren't. His music became a confessional, a place to explore his spirituality without preaching, to question without claiming to know it all. Compton remained his anchor, but going back wasn't always simple. He was a hero to some, the kid who made out, but others saw him as distant, a star who left the hood behind. He'd visit his old neighborhood, walked the same streets where he dodged gang fights as a teen, but now he was a target, not just for critics, but for those who felt he'd changed. Some locals resented his success, whispering he'd gone Hollywood, while others begged for handouts, testing his loyalty. Kendrick stayed loyal, shouting out Compton in every album, every interview, but he felt the sting of judgment. He gave back quietly, funding music programs for kids, showing up at community events, but he couldn't please everyone. The rap world brought its own drama. Kendrick's 2013 verse on Big Sean's Control was a bold move, calling out nearly a dozen rappers by name, declaring he wanted to be the best and sparking a firestorm. Some, like Drake, took it personally, and the tension simmered for years, boiling over into a full-blown feud by 2024. Kendrick's diss tracks, like Not Like Us, were surgical, hitting Drake with sharp bars about authenticity and culture, and the hip-hop world ate it up, declaring Kendrick the victor. But beef wasn't his focus. He'd rather write about his city than trade insults. Still, the feud showed he could hold his own, proving his pen was as sharp as ever. The pressure of being a cultural icon was another hurdle. His music, especially To Pimp a Butterfly, made him a voice for Black Lives Matter, with All Right becoming an anthem for protests against police brutality. Activists quoted his lyrics, politicians name-dropped him, but not everyone agreed with his approach. Some critics called him too soft, saying he didn't go hard enough against systemic racism. Others said he was too political, alienating fans who just wanted bangers. Kendrick didn't bend. He kept speaking his truth, using his platform to talk about issues like mental health and inequality, but he felt the weight of being a spokesperson. He was human, not a superhero, and his music reflected that struggle, from the raw vulnerability of I to the introspective fear. He stayed grounded through his inner circle, TD, his family, and a few close friends like Dave Free, his longtime collaborator. He avoided the party scene, steering clear of drug and alcohol, a choice rooted in seeing addiction destroy lives in Compton. His discipline was legendary. He'd wake up early, write for hours, and treat every studio session like a mission. But that discipline didn't shield him from self-doubt or the loneliness of fame. Touring the world meant months away from Whitney and his kids, and the road was grueling. Endless flights, screaming crowds, and the constant need to perform. He'd pour his heart out on stage, then retreat to his hotel room, wrestling with thoughts he couldn't share with anyone but his notebook. His music was his therapy, a way to process the pain of losing friends of violence, the guilt of surviving, and the fear of losing himself to the industry. By the late 2010s, Kendrick was at a crossroads. He was a global star, but he was still searching for peace. His relationship with Whitney kept him steady. She was his rock, someone who knew him before the Grammys and the headlines. Father had changed him too, giving him a new purpose, a reason to keep going when the world felt heavy. He'd rap about his kids, about wanting to be a better man for them. And those lines hit fans who saw their own struggles in his words. Kendrick's challenges weren't just personal. They were tied to his identity as a black man, a Compton native, a rapper expected to carry a culture. He faced the same racism he rapped about, from subtle slights in the industry to the broader systems that kept Compton struggling. He used his music to fight back, not with fists but with words, crafting albums that were both mirrors and megaphones. His private nature made him an enigma. Fans knew his heart through his lyrics, but he rarely gave interviews, rarely showed up at award shows unless he was performing. He'd rather let his music speak than explain himself to the world. That choice kept him authentic but also isolated, leaving him to carry the weight of his thoughts alone. By the time he was in his early 30s, Kendrick had faced more than most: fame, loss, depression, and the pressure of being a voice for a generation. But he kept moving forward, using his pain to fuel his art, his faith to guide his path, and his love for his family in Compton to keep him grounded. Kendrick Lamar's legacy is bigger than any award or album. It's the story of a kid from Compton who turned his pain, his city, and his truth into art that changed the world, a voice that spoke of those who felt unheard, and a blueprint for what it means to stay real while reaching the top. By 2025, at age 38, Kendrick had already cemented himself as one of the greatest rappers ever, not just for his skill, but for his ability to make music that felt like a movement, a mirror, and a map for navigating life struggles. His albums, Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers and GNX, are more than classics. They're time capsules, each one capturing a moment in his life and the world around him, from the chaos of Compton streets to the weight of fame and the fight for justice. He's won 17 Grammys, a Pulitzer Prize for Damn. In 2018, the first for a hip-hop artist, and an Oscar nomination for his work on the Black Panther soundtrack. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Kendrick's impact is in the kids who blast "All Right" at protests, the teachers who use his lyrics to teach poetry, the fans who find hope in his stories of surviving a city that tried to break him. His music gave Compton a voice, not just as a place of struggle, but as a place of pride, resilience, and creativity. Songs like Humble and King Kuna are anthems, played at cookouts, clubs, and car stereos, while deeper cuts like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, and Fear hit like therapy sessions, making listeners face their own pain and purpose. Kendrick didn't just make hits. He made music that mattered, tackling racism, mental health, faith, and fatherhood in ways that felt raw and universal. His influence stretched beyond hip-hop, shaping culture in ways few artists ever do. Fashion brands looked to his style. Filmmakers drew from his storytelling, and politicians quoted his lyrics in speeches about equality. He inspired a generation of rappers, from J. Cole, who called him a brother, to newer voices like Baby Keem, his cousin, who he mentored and collaborated with on tracks like Family Ties. Kendrick's verse on Control in 2013 set a standard, challenging rappers to step up or step aside. In his 2024 feud with Drake, with tracks like Not Like Us, reminded the world he was still untouchable, blending sharp bars with cultural commentary that hit harder than any diss. But Kendrick's legacy isn't just in music. It's in how he carried Compton with him, never turning his back on the city that raised him. He funded programs for kids, like music workshops and scholarships, and showed up at local events, from charity basketball games to school visits, proving he was still one of them. His 2025 Super Bowl halftime show in New Orleans was a celebration of his roots, with Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and other West Coast legends joining him on stage, a moment that showed the world Compton's heart. Beyond music, Kendrick built something bigger with PG Lang, the creative company he co-founded in 2020 with his longtime friend and collaborator Dave Free. PG Lang wasn't just a record label. It was a hub for art, music, film, and storytelling, a way to create on his own terms. Through PG Lang, he produced music videos, short films, and even worked on a comedy movie with Eddie Murphy set for release in 2025, showing he could cross into new mediums without losing his edge. He mentored young artists like Baby Keem, whose 2021 album The Melodic Blue was a breakout, and Tana Leone, another TD talent, proving Kendrick was as much a teacher as a creator. He left Top Dog Entertainment in 2021, not out of conflict, but to chase his own vision, a move that showed his confidence in building something new. His 2022 album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, was his most personal yet, diving into therapy, trauma, and fatherhood, with tracks like Mother I Sober, confronting generational pain, and Count Me Out, reflecting on self-worth. It wasn't as radio-friendly as Damn, selling 295,000 units in its first week, but was honest, showing a rapper unafraid to grow, even if it meant losing some fans. In 2024, he surprised the world with GNX, a raw, urgent album that felt like a return to his Compton roots, with songs like Luther and TV Off blending storytelling with bangers that hit clubs and car speakers alike. The album, inspired by his love for Pontiac cars and his city's hustle, debuted at number 1, selling 400,000 units, and proved he could still dominate. Kendrick's future is wide open. He's hinted at more music, maybe an album that digs even deeper into his psyche, or a shift to new stories through film or books. He's talked about directing, wanting to tell Compton stories on the big screen, and his work with PG Lang suggests he's already laying the groundwork. He's also committed to giving back, expanding his community work in Compton, from funding arts programs to mentoring kids who remind him of his younger self. The challenges of his legacy are real. Every move is scrutinized, every album expected to top the last, and the weight of speaking for a culture never lifts. He's faced criticism, from those who say he's too conscious to those who think he's not radical enough. But Kendrick keeps going, guided by his faith, his family, and his pen. His relationship with Whitney Alford and their 2 kids, Uzi and Enoch, keeps him grounded, a reminder of what matters when the world gets loud. He's stayed private, dodging the traps of celebrity culture, and that authenticity is part of his power. Kendrick's legacy is about showing what's possible. A kid from a city written off by many, rise and tell stories that resonate across the globe, proving talent and heart can break any barrier. He's not done yet. The world is still waiting for his next chapter, whether it's a new album, a film, or a book. But one thing is clear. Kendrick Lamar will keep telling the truth for Compton, for himself, and for anyone listening.